The hum of fluorescent lights above seemed endless, but inside Sterling Innovation's sleek boardroom, tension buzzed louder than any machine. Deadlines were collapsing, reputations teetering, and an empire built on technology was moments away from crumbling. But hidden beneath the corporate panic was a story much bigger than power grids or product launches. It was the story of one man, an ex-soldier turned maintenance worker, and a woman who had spent her entire life hiding her heart behind armor made of ice and ambition. Neither of them knew yet that in the next few hours, their lives would change forever. Because sometimes, it isn't the wealthiest or the most brilliant who save the day. Sometimes, it's the person everyone overlooked. And sometimes, it's in the darkest hour, when everything feels broken, that love has its first chance to break through. The crisis began with a single piercing alarm echoing through the Sterling Innovations headquarters in Austin, Texas. Screens across the command center flickered red, warning of a total systems failure in the company's state-of-the-art energy generator, just hours before the global launch that Olivia Sterling, CEO, had promised would revolutionize the industry. Olivia stood at the head of the boardroom, her tailored navy suit a sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling around her. She was the definition of control, tall, striking, with hair pulled tightly back, eyes as cold as steel. But beneath her polished surface lay scars she'd sworn no one would ever see. She could not fail. Not again. "Get it back online," she ordered the engineers, her voice cutting like glass. "We launch at 6 p.m., no excuses." But excuses were all her team seemed to have. The generator was fried, diagnostics inconclusive, and panic rippled through the staff like a virus. The company's brightest minds were powerless, and the empire Olivia had built was on the edge of humiliation. In the corner of the room stood Daniel Walker, a maintenance worker who had quietly been tightening bolts and checking wiring for years while executives passed him without a glance. But Daniel was not just a maintenance man. Once, he had been a lieutenant colonel in the Army Corps of Engineers, a man who built and rebuilt power systems in deserts where failure meant death. His uniform was gone now, replaced by oil-stained coveralls, but the discipline and fire in his eyes had never dimmed. He had no seat at the boardroom table. He had no voice in this empire of glass and chrome. But he could see what the others missed. When yet another engineer muttered something about catastrophic failure, Daniel stepped forward. His voice was steady, quiet, but firm. "I can fix it." The room froze. Heads turned. Olivia's piercing eyes narrowed. To her, Daniel Walker was invisible, a name on a paycheck, a man who swept up after others. And now he was daring to speak in her boardroom, during her crisis? She studied him with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "You," she said sharply. "If my top engineers can't fix this, what makes you think you can?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Because I've seen systems fail in worse conditions. And I've fixed them. What's broken here isn't just the wiring. It's the way you're looking at it." Gasps fluttered around the table. No one spoke to Olivia Sterling like that. For a moment, Olivia's mask slipped. Something about Daniel's tone, the certainty, the quiet defiance, cut through her icy armor. And then, with a cold smirk, she leaned forward. "Fine. Fix it. But let's make this interesting." Her eyes glittered with challenge, the boardroom silent, waiting for her next words. "If you succeed, I'll kiss you. Right here. In front of everyone. If you fail, pack your things. You're fired. No severance." The room erupted in whispers. Olivia's words weren't just a dare. They were a public humiliation waiting to happen. But Daniel didn't waver. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked briefly to the small photo he carried in his breast pocket. His daughter, Emily, beaming as she held her robotics project. She had a school showcase tomorrow, and he had promised he'd be there, proud and smiling. He couldn't afford to lose this job. But more than that, he couldn't afford to fail her. "I'll take that bet," Daniel said simply. The air thickened with disbelief. Olivia leaned back, a flicker of something, perhaps admiration, perhaps fear, crossing her face before her walls slammed back into place. And so, with the future of Sterling Innovations hanging in the balance, and an impossible wager on the line, Daniel Walker walked into the heart of the machine. What Olivia didn't know yet was that this moment, the one she thought would prove her dominance, was the very moment that would change her life forever. Daniel's hands moved with military precision. He stripped back panels, recalibrated wiring, and overrode faulty circuits with methods no corporate engineer had ever considered. Sweat ran down his temples, but his eyes stayed sharp. He wasn't just repairing steel and copper, he was fighting for his daughter's tomorrow. Time bled away. Minutes felt like hours. Every spark was a gamble, every adjustment a prayer. Olivia watched from the observation deck, her arms still folded, but inside, her thoughts churned. She had dismissed him as ordinary beneath her. Yet here he was, commanding the machine with a confidence her elite team lacked. Against her will, something unfamiliar stirred in her chest, respect, maybe even curiosity. The generator roared back to life with a thunderous hum. Lights stabilized. Control panels turned from red to green. Sterling Innovations was saved. The boardroom burst into cheers, but Olivia didn't move. Her icy mask faltered as she locked eyes with Daniel through the glass. For the first time in years, she felt shaken, not by failure, but by possibility. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply stood, wiped the sweat from his brow, and walked out of the generator room, his dignity unshaken. He hadn't fixed it for Olivia. He hadn't fixed it for Sterling Innovations. He had fixed it for Emily. But Olivia Sterling would never forget that moment. And deep down, neither would he. The generator's triumphant hum echoed through the Sterling Innovations building, but the sound did little to calm the storm inside Olivia Sterling's chest. She had expected Daniel Walker to fail spectacularly, to prove himself nothing more than a bold janitor who dared to speak above his place. Instead, he had succeeded where her engineers had failed. And worse, he had done it with a quiet dignity that unsettled her far more than she cared to admit. For years, Olivia had survived in a world of wolves by becoming sharper, colder, untouchable. Yet something in Daniel's eyes, the fire, the sacrifice, pierced her armor in a way no billionaire rival, no boardroom betrayal ever had. She had underestimated him. And now, she couldn't stop thinking about him. But Olivia wasn't the only one whose life was shifting. Daniel returned home that night to his modest two-bedroom house in South Austin. The place smelled faintly of old wood and fresh laundry. It was a far cry from Sterling's glass towers, but to Daniel, it was heaven because it was where Emily waited. She was 12 years old, all bright eyes and messy brown curls, tinkering on her half-finished robot in the living room when he walked through the door. "Dad," she cried, running to him, grease still on her hands. "Did you fix it? Or did they fire you?" Daniel laughed, lifting her into a hug. "Fixed it. They didn't stand a chance." Emily grinned wide, the kind of grin that lit up his whole world. "Good. Because tomorrow's showcase, you promised you'd be there, remember?" "I'll be there," Daniel said, his voice low with determination. No matter what. For him, that promise was sacred. He had already lost too much, his marriage, his chance at a comfortable life. He wouldn't let Emily down. Not ever. Meanwhile, Olivia sat alone in her penthouse, overlooking the Austin skyline. The city lights sparkled against the dark glass windows, but she barely noticed. She was still replaying the moment Daniel had looked at her, not with fear, not with awe, but with resolve. Her father's voice crackled through her mind. "Weakness is death, Olivia. Never depend on anyone. Never let anyone close enough to hurt you." Her father, Richard Sterling, was not a man of warmth. He was a titan of industry, a man who had taught Olivia from childhood that emotions were flaws, that control was survival. And when her mother had taken her own life, leaving Olivia with more questions than answers, Richard's teachings had hardened into law. That law had made her CEO. That law had made her strong. But tonight, for the first time, she questioned it, because Daniel Walker had made her feel something she wasn't supposed to feel. The next morning, the robotics showcase buzzed with energy in the crowded middle school gymnasium. Parents filled the bleachers, cheering for their kids. Daniel sat front row, pride swelling as Emily prepared to demonstrate her project, a robot that could lift and sort objects with surprising accuracy. He clapped louder than anyone when Emily's robot worked flawlessly. His heart nearly burst at her beaming smile. But what Daniel didn't notice, at least not at first, was the tall, striking woman standing quietly at the back of the gym. Olivia Sterling, in a perfectly pressed coat, trying awkwardly to blend into a sea of PDA parents. She had come without fully understanding why. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps something else. Watching Daniel with Emily was like peering into a life she had never known. A life of love untainted by ambition, of family unscarred by betrayal. When Emily spotted her, Olivia froze. The girl ran to her father, whispering, "Dad, that's the lady from the news, isn't it? The Ice Queen CEO." Daniel's eyes shot to the back of the gym, narrowing in surprise. Olivia didn't flinch. She stepped forward. "You have a remarkable daughter," she said softly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "And you're far from your boardroom, Miss Sterling." Emily, oblivious to the tension, piped up, "Do you want to see my robot?" Olivia hesitated, then knelt down. I'd love to. For the first time in years, she smiled, genuinely smiled, as Emily proudly explained the mechanics. Daniel watched in silence, conflicted. Olivia Sterling, the woman who had wagered his job on a kiss, was now kneeling in front of his daughter, her icy mask melting into something human. It was unsettling, and yet he couldn't look away. But not everyone approved of this fragile connection forming. That evening, Richard Sterling summoned his daughter to his estate outside the city. His house was less a home and more a fortress, marble floors, towering windows, and silence heavy enough to crush. Olivia sat across from him at the long dining table, feeling 12 years old again. I hear you've been seen, Richard said coldly, with a maintenance worker. A single father, no less. Olivia's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. His name is Daniel Walker. Her father's lip curled. Do you think you can run Sterling Innovations with men like that circling you? Do you think investors will respect you if you drag a repairman into our family? It's my life, Olivia said, but her voice shook. No, Richard said, his tone final. It's mine, and I won't watch you throw it away on sentimentality. You will end this distraction. Do you understand? Olivia said nothing, but in her silence was the faintest flicker of rebellion, a spark that Daniel had unknowingly lit. That night, she lay awake in her penthouse, torn between two worlds. The one her father demanded, cold, controlled, invulnerable, and the one Daniel and Emily showed her, filled with warmth she barely knew how to touch. And deep down, Olivia knew, a storm was coming. The days after the robotics showcase passed like a blur, but the memory of Olivia Sterling kneeling on the gym floor with Emily lingered in Daniel's mind longer than he cared to admit. She wasn't supposed to belong in his world. She was power in glass towers, he was grease-stained shirts and late-night grocery runs. Yet somehow, she had stepped into his orbit. And stranger still, Emily liked her. One afternoon, Emily insisted that her dad invite Olivia to dinner. She was nice, Dad. You should have seen her smile. You don't smile like that unless you mean it. Daniel shook his head, chuckling. Emily, she's not like us. Emily frowned. So what? She's lonely. I can tell. She needs friends. And you need friends too. Out of the mouths of children came truths too sharp to ignore. Olivia was caught off guard when she received Daniel's hesitant text. Dinner at our place? Emily insisted. Her first instinct was to decline. Dinner with a maintenance worker's family didn't fit into her carefully constructed life. But something deep inside her, a hunger she hadn't fed in years, pushed her to type back, "What time?" That evening, Olivia stepped into Daniel's modest home. The walls were decorated with Emily's school projects, the scent of garlic and butter filled the air, and laughter, real laughter, echoed through the rooms. Olivia felt like she had entered another world. She wasn't Olivia Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations here. She was just a woman sitting at a worn wooden table, passing bowls of spaghetti, listening to Emily chatter about science fairs and dreams. And for the first time in decades, she felt human. Daniel watched quietly as Olivia listened, her sharp edges softening with each passing moment. He had never seen her like this, and though part of him wanted to stay cautious, another part, buried deep, wanted to believe she could belong here. But where warmth grew in Daniel's home, ice hardened at Richard Sterling's estate. Richard's network of informants had kept him well informed. He knew Olivia had dined at Daniel's home, knew she had laughed with his daughter, knew her mask was cracking. To him, this was betrayal. He summoned her again, this time not to lecture but to threaten. "You're making a fool of yourself," Richard said coldly, pacing his study. "Investors are whispering. The board is restless. If you continue this entanglement, you won't just lose your reputation. You'll lose everything I built for you." Olivia's chest tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "Maybe I don't want what you built." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Olivia. You've survived because you've obeyed me. Without my protection, you are nothing." The words sliced deeper than she let him see. She left his estate with her hands trembling, torn between fear and the faint spark of rebellion Daniel had ignited in her. Back at Sterling Innovations, the fallout began to show. Board members whispered in corridors. Reporters started sniffing around, curious about the Ice Queen CEO spotted at a middle school gymnasium. Olivia felt the walls of her empire shifting, threatening to crumble, not from the generator failure, but from her father's disapproval and her own fragile heart. Daniel, too, felt the weight. At work, whispers followed him. "That's the guy who fixed the generator, the one the boss is seeing." Some spoke with admiration, others with contempt. Daniel ignored them all, focusing on his job, but inside he feared the same thing Olivia did. Their worlds weren't built to overlap. Yet in the quiet evenings, when Olivia visited his home under the guise of helping Emily with her robotics, the fear melted away. They laughed, cooked, and shared stories. Slowly, cautiously, Olivia began opening up, about her mother, about the emptiness she had carried since childhood. Daniel listened, never judging, his quiet presence like an anchor. And Daniel, in turn, found himself telling her about his past in the army, about his wife who had left when life grew too hard, about the nights he had cried silently so Emily wouldn't hear. Two broken souls, bound by scars, finding comfort in each other's honesty. One night, as Emily slept and the house grew quiet, Olivia lingered at the kitchen sink beside Daniel. Their hands brushed as they rinsed dishes. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken words. "Olivia," Daniel said softly, his voice rough. "Why are you here?" "Really here?" She turned, meeting his eyes. For once, there was no armor in hers. Only vulnerability. "Because," she whispered, "with you, I don't feel like I'm drowning." Daniel's chest tightened, and for a moment, he wanted nothing more than to close the distance between them. But before he could speak, Olivia stepped back, her walls rising again. "I should go." She left into the night, her perfume lingering, her absence heavier than her presence. Yet as Olivia drove back to her penthouse, her father's words echoed like chains around her heart. "Without me, you are nothing." She gripped the wheel tighter, torn between the life of safety and power her father demanded, and the fragile, dangerous promise of love she had glimpsed at Daniel's table. Daniel, meanwhile, lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had faced war zones, rebuilt collapsed systems, and survived abandonment. But nothing terrified him more than the thought of letting Olivia in, and losing her. For both of them, the line between strength and weakness had never felt so thin, and neither of them knew that Richard Sterling was already plotting his next move, one that would test them in ways they never imagined. The morning after Olivia left Daniel's kitchen, she awoke to a storm she hadn't seen coming. News headlines blared across every business channel. Sterling Innovations CEO linked to maintenance worker, scandal or soft spot. Olivia Sterling's secret life, power or pretend? Someone had leaked photos, grainy shots of Olivia leaving Daniel's home at night, Emily waving goodbye at the door, Olivia laughing over takeout boxes in Daniel's kitchen. The images were harmless to anyone else, but in the world of billion-dollar contracts and boardroom politics, they were poison. Olivia's phone rang endlessly. Reporters camped outside Sterling Tower. Her board demanded an emergency meeting. And behind it all, she could feel her father's fingerprints. Richard Sterling had finally made his move. In the boardroom that day, Olivia faced a wall of stern faces. Men and women who had once bowed to her now stared with thinly veiled contempt. "Your personal choices are jeopardizing this company," one board member said sharply. "Investors are questioning your judgment," another added. Richard sat at the head of the table, his eyes glinting with triumph. "Step down for a period of reflection, Olivia. Save what's left of your credibility." Her hands curled into fists beneath the table. Step down? For caring about a man who had shown her more kindness in a month than her father had in a lifetime? For daring to feel human? "No," Olivia said firmly. "I won't resign. My personal life is not a liability. It's mine." Richard's smile was slow and venomous. "Then watch everything fall apart." At Sterling Innovations' maintenance wing, Daniel was blindsided by the fallout. Co-workers who once joked with him now avoided his gaze. Supervisors warned him to keep his head down. One afternoon, his manager pulled him aside. "Daniel, I'm sorry. Orders from upstairs. You're being reassigned, night shifts only. No contact with executives." Daniel understood immediately who was behind it. Richard was cutting him out, punishing him without ever saying his name. When he told Olivia, she closed her eyes, guilt written all over her face. "This is my fault." "No," Daniel said firmly. "This is him. Your father. He thinks he can control us." Her voice trembled. "And maybe he can." For the first time, Daniel saw fear in her eyes, not fear of losing her company, but fear of losing him. As days turned into weeks, pressure mounted. Reporters hounded Olivia. Daniel worked grueling late hours, coming home exhausted, but still managing to tuck Emily into bed. And yet, in stolen moments, they found each other. One night, Olivia sneaked into the maintenance hangar where Daniel worked. The clanging of tools echoed in the cavernous space. He looked up, startled, then softened when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted, stepping closer. Everywhere I go, I feel like I'm suffocating. But when I'm with you, she trailed off, eyes shining with something she had never dared show him before. Daniel dropped the wrench, his hands still greasy, and reached for hers. Olivia, you don't have to do this alone. Her lips trembled. If I stay with you, I could lose everything I've worked for. Daniel's voice was steady. And if you don't, you'll lose yourself. For a moment, the world outside didn't matter. The hangar lights flickered overhead, the scent of oil and metal filled the air, and in that fragile space, they allowed themselves the truth. They needed each other. But Richard was not done. He tightened his grip on Olivia's empire, pulling strings with investors and manipulating the press. Anonymous tips suddenly appeared about financial irregularities in sterling innovations, fabrications, but damaging enough to spark an investigation. Then came the cruelest blow. Child Protective Services showed up at Daniel's door. An anonymous complaint had been filed claiming Emily wasn't being properly cared for. Daniel's blood ran cold as he realized what this meant. Richard wasn't just coming for him, he was coming for Emily. Daniel called Olivia that night, his voice ragged. Your father crossed a line. He's using my daughter to get to me. Olivia felt sick, rage burning in her chest. I'll stop him. I swear, Daniel, I'll stop him. But deep down, both of them knew Richard Sterling was a man who had never lost a war, and he had no intention of losing this one. Olivia returned to her penthouse that night and collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. She had spent her life proving she was strong, untouchable. But Richard had found her weakness. Daniel and Emily were no longer just people she cared about, they were her heart. And Richard was determined to crush them. She thought of Daniel's words in the hangar. If you don't, you'll lose yourself. For the first time, Olivia wondered if love was worth the war that came with it. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Emily's smile, Daniel's steady gaze, and the fleeting moments of peace she had found in their small home. Yes, it was worth it, even if it meant standing against her own father. The storm finally broke on a rainy Friday night. Olivia had spent the week firefighting, meetings with lawyers, boardrooms filled with whispers, investors demanding assurances. But beneath the corporate chaos lay the deeper wound, Richard's attack on Daniel and Emily. That was a war she could no longer ignore. Her father had built her life like a gilded cage. And for the first time, she was ready to tear it apart. She called Daniel. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. Tomorrow, my father's estate. I'm confronting him. Will you come? There was silence, then Daniel's quiet reply. I'll be there. For you. For us. The next day, the sky hung gray and heavy as Daniel arrived with Olivia at the Sterling estate. Emily stayed with a neighbor. This battle wasn't hers to fight. Richard was waiting in his study, the same place where he had once threatened Olivia into obedience. He didn't look surprised to see Daniel beside her. So this is the man, Richard sneered. The mechanic who thinks he can save you. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Olivia stepped forward. For the first time in her life, she looked her father in the eye without flinching. This ends now. Richard laughed, cold and cruel. You think you can defy me? Everything you have, your company, your reputation, it exists because of me. No, Olivia said, her voice rising. It exists in spite of you. I built Sterling Innovations. I worked for every deal, every sleepless night, every success. You didn't give me my power, you only convinced me I didn't deserve it. Richard's smile faltered, but his eyes hardened. And him? He gestured at Daniel. You'll throw away everything for a janitor? Daniel stepped forward, finally speaking. His voice was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. I'm not here to take her company. I'm not here to climb your world. I'm here because your daughter deserves someone who sees her as a person, not a pawn. The room went still. Olivia's throat tightened. For years, she had begged for her father's approval, swallowed her tears, played the perfect heir. But standing there, with Daniel's quiet strength beside her, she realized she didn't need it anymore. She straightened her shoulders. I'm done, father. With your threats, with your control, with your empire of fear. If you want to destroy me, do it. But know this, her voice trembled but did not break, you'll never have me again. Richard slammed his hand against the desk, rage boiling. You ungrateful child. Without me, you'll fall. Olivia met his fury with silence. The kind of silence that carried finality. Then, she turned and walked out. Daniel followed, but not before giving Richard one last look. A look that said what words never could. You've already lost. The fallout was immediate. The board tried to pressure Olivia again, but she surprised them all. She announced she was restructuring Sterling Innovations, stripping her father's hidden influence and creating transparency that had never existed before. Some investors balked, others cheered. The Ice Queen was gone, but in her place stood something stronger, a leader unafraid of being human. Richard's allies scattered. His empire, once untouchable, began to crumble under scrutiny. For a man who had controlled everything, losing Olivia's loyalty was the first domino that toppled the rest. As for Daniel, his reassignment was reversed. Olivia made sure of it, but more than that, she made sure he was respected. He wasn't just the man who fixed the generator. He was the man who had shown her how to breathe again. Weeks later, Olivia found herself back in Daniel's modest home. Emily had set the table, giggling as she placed mismatched plates. Daniel cooked, humming softly, and Olivia, for the first time, didn't feel like a guest. She felt like she belonged. As they sat down to eat, Emily looked between them with a grin. "So are you two in love yet?" Daniel choked on his drink. Olivia laughed, a sound so genuine it startled even herself. She reached across the table and took Daniel's hand, squeezing it gently. "Yes, Emily," she said softly. "I think we are." Daniel's eyes met hers, and for once, he didn't look away. The world outside might never understand. But here, in this little home filled with warmth, they had everything they needed. That night, as Daniel walked Olivia to the door, she paused. Rain pattered softly outside, but inside her chest there was peace. "I used to think strength meant being untouchable," she whispered. "But you showed me it means letting someone in." Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice low and sure. "And you showed me it's okay to hope again." They kissed, soft, lingering, a promise of everything yet to come. For Olivia, it wasn't just love. It was freedom. For Daniel, it wasn't just hope. It was home. And for Emily, asleep upstairs, it was the beginning of a family she had always dreamed of. Richard Sterling never apologized. Men like him rarely did. But Olivia no longer needed his apology. She had broken his chains. The world saw her as a CEO. Daniel saw her as a woman. Emily saw her as family. And for the first time in her life, Olivia Sterling finally saw herself, clearly, wholly, and free.